Welcome back to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town for this Friday, April 22nd. I'm Gary Stevens. With Friday of the month, this time slot, we devote to law enforcement conversation with Ottawa County Sheriff Steve Capt, but Steve is unable to join us today. Hope to catch up with him in May, but in his stead is Ottawa County Sheriff's Detective Captain Jake Sparks, who joins us via the Zoom connection from the Sheriff's Department headquarters in West Olive. Jake, good morning and welcome to WHTC, sir.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on, Gary.
Glad you are with us. If you have a question about law enforcement, Jake will do his best to answer it at 616-395-1450, 616-395-1450. I want to begin our conversation, Jake, with a story that you passed along to media outlets yesterday, and I'm going to use the term tax resolution unit. You mentioned it. It has all the looks of a scam.
That's exactly right. Being that there isn't a tax resolution unit at Ottawa County, we've been in contact with the treasurer's office and some businesses around town, and it sounds like throughout the country, have received a letter on letterhead that claims to be a distraint warrant that is from the tax resolution unit at Ottawa County. And there is no such unit, there is no such warrant or no such letter that is going out from anyone in Ottawa County. So please let your listeners know that that is a scam. It's fraudulent mailing. We're still investigating the source of that, but it sounds like it's a scam that's been going on throughout the county and people should disregard it.
Distraint warrant. I've never heard of it before. You mentioned it in the email yesterday, Jake.
Well, I've never heard of it either. So until we saw it, typically these scams, these frauds, they try to put people, they try to confuse people. They try to put some sort of urgency on it. In this case, claiming that there'll be, garnishment of wages, claiming that there'll be a lien on their property and that type of thing, and then encourage some sort of urgency, like if they don't act in the next 14 days, then their property will be seized or their wages will be garnished. So they create some sort of urgency and use some language that's unfamiliar to people, and that makes people tend to act on this without thinking because they're afraid something bad's going to happen. So fraudulent, it's a scam. Don't believe it, and contact us if you have any more questions or if you need to report one of those frauds.
Now, might not be a question you can answer, Jake, and maybe you don't want to answer because you don't want to give anybody any ideas about trying to make a successful scam. But if there was a legitimate situation where somebody is in arrears with their taxes with the county, what is the normal avenues that should be used so that the people can believe that this is a legitimate one and not a scam?
Sure. And I talked with the treasurer's office about that, and they said that they will send out some communications. Those will look much more authentic than what this letter looked like, which is basically just a copy and paste letter. They'll have the county's letterhead on them. You can contact somebody by phone at the treasurer's office here. You can come to the Fillmore Street complex, speak with somebody at the treasurer's office. You can go online and make contact with somebody at the treasurer's office. But if you're ever in doubt, just follow up with it, not by calling the number on the letter. In this case, that was a fraudulent phone number provided as well that actually went to a call center. But you can come right down here to the Fillmore Street complex, check in with somebody, talk to a real person and say, hey, I got this letter. Is this true? Is this accurate? They'll be able to answer your questions very quickly about that.
I don't want to sound simplistic on this, Jake, but sometimes if you take a look, you got to call this number. And then you go online to see whether or not that number is connected to the department and you don't see that. It's like, that's a red flag right there.
Right. If things don't match, the number that's provided on the website, the number that's easily accessible through the sheriff's office or through the county of Ottawa or a city municipality, if you live there, if that doesn't match the mailing that you're getting, something's wrong there. So you're right. That is a red flag.
And of course, scams. I mean, it's almost as if it's April 2022. Okay, we have this scam. May 2022, we'll have another one. We had one last in March. It's almost as if there's a scam of the month club going on right now.
Oh, very, very frequently do we deal with these types of calls. Unfortunately, a lot of people fall for them or they're duped into them. Like I say, these people are good. They're professionals, professional criminals and scam artists, and they create that sense of urgency, fear. Another one that we see very often is where a caller will pretend to have be with the potential victim's grandchild or somebody like that, and that they're in police custody, and you need to send me $20,000 right now for their bail money, and then we'll be able to release them. And they'll carry this out so far as to even put another young sounding male or female on the phone for just a minute and convince the person that that's their child or grandchild that's in custody right now. And if they get sent $20,000 or $10,000, they'll be released from bond. Unfortunately, people often do that, thinking it's real, thinking it's legitimate. Then they call back an hour later and say, well, now they need another $10,000 for legal fees, and people are sending that as well. So it's just really sad to see people getting duped out of their hard-earned money, but unfortunately, we deal with them all the time.
One other thing along those lines, Jake, and then we'll take a break. If, say, for example, a listener that's listening right now, they get such a call, and they're concerned about whether or not it's on the level. Can they contact, for example, the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department and saying, hey, my grandson lives in Provo, Utah. I got a call saying he's in trouble there. Can you check to see if it's legit? Can you run that, or is that a jurisdictional thing?
No, we can check into that for sure. Another thing that should be red flags for any of your listeners, law enforcement will never ask you to put money on gift cards or on iTunes gift cards or convert anything to cryptocurrency. We're seeing that again very frequently now, and we can discuss that later if need be. But law enforcement won't ask cash to be sent via FedEx or UPS. Law enforcement won't ask you to convert things to Bitcoin and send it via the internet. And we're not going to have you put anything on gift cards. And that's what typically these scam artists all do.
Jake, before we came on, I was mentioning a story out of the Detroit area that had similarities to a case in these parts a few years ago about a 16-year-old boy facing charges in the United Kingdom for making threats against several Oakland County schools on April the 8th. He was arrested on April 13th. Homeland Security is working with law enforcement in the UK on what charges he would face. The boy allegedly pretended to be the Oxford High School shooting suspect when he made the threats, threatening to shoot up 5 schools, including Oxford High School. A few years ago, I mentioned the case of Ransom the Thug, who had some swatting incidents in these parts before he was finally tracked down in the Liverpool area of the UK. It's almost as if every once in a while this old bugaboo comes back of people wanting to be copycats and trying to get their jollies by making threats that they know they aren't going to fulfill.
Right. Yes. It's a good point too, Gary. We have seen these once in a while. They'll pop back up, just like you mentioned. The internet, I will say, is a great tool, useful for many things. Unfortunately, it's also opened up a whole new world for crooks, and then also for people who would want to do these threats and try to hide in anonymity. We've got some great technical computer people here who are able to investigate those types of crimes, and yeah, like you mentioned, even track people back to the UK at times. So it's becoming more and more difficult because there's a lot of different places to hide out there on the internet, but certainly those can create a huge response from law enforcement. We have to treat them all as serious, which puts innocent people in harm's way as well when we're responding thinking that there's a major active incident going on. So very unfortunate, those types of calls.
I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jake, that when investigators use the web, use the internet to try to track down people, not only the regular internet that we all go through, but also the dark web. And that's where really things get a little murky, don't they? Yeah,
that's a whole nother story there. I don't know if your listeners know what the dark web is, but for the most part, it's a place where it's not as public, it's not as trackable. People think they can hide there. Criminals think they can hide the exchange of anything. I mentioned cryptocurrency or Bitcoin earlier. Things can be paid with that internet currency. There can be images or things traded back and forth among users. pornography or child sexually abusive material, we call it. All kinds of things can take place. And like I said, communications back and forth between people, between partners or different criminal elements. So thankfully, not everybody who's talking on there is always a criminal. There can be law enforcement on there too that's monitoring that as well. So I think as criminals have changed, law enforcement always has to change to stay up on the latest technologies.
Staying up is one thing, staying a step ahead. Now that's really the important thing along those lines. One other thing too, Jake, and you brought it up a couple of times. Let's talk a little bit about this. Dealing with cryptocurrency, the non-fungible tokens. For a lot of us, and I'm putting myself in this category, that's a whole different world, and I'm not going to get involved with it at all. Unfortunately, law enforcement has to get involved with it because we're talking about something that right now, we're talking lots of dollars involved. And if there's some scams along the lines, it's still a wild west show out there in terms of dealing with cryptocurrencies.
Right, exactly. And I didn't know until several months ago. We all did some training here in the investigative unit because it's becoming so prevalent. And a lot of our big frauds that we're dealing with and investigating these days aren't even with US dollars like you or I are familiar with. So the scam artist, the criminal in this case, would ask the victim to take real US dollars and take them to a kiosk, which are set up anywhere around West Michigan, and then convert them over, or send a routing number from a bank account to convert real US dollars over to cryptocurrency. Then that gets shipped off somewhere overseas via an online transfer, and your money is gone. Your real hard-earned US currency is gone. It's been converted to cryptocurrency, and it's in the hands of somebody in a different country. So never will the sheriff's office or any legitimate business around here at this point that I know of ask you to convert US dollars to cryptocurrency and send it off somewhere. That's become a real problem, and we're dealing with it frequently.
Not only your department, but I would think this is something that federal officials need to be and state officials have to be, because this is maybe going far beyond what Ottawa County is.
Oh, exactly. And we work frequently with the IRS on these cases, with the Secret Service, with the FBI. We've partnered with all of them on some of these investigations. Sometimes we're able to track them and get the people's money back, but unfortunately, sometimes we're not. And like I said, that's not going to be a legitimate request if somebody's asking you or putting you in that situation, that sense of urgency, trying to get you to convert some money over and send it, or promising a big return, promising that you're going to get a Corvette in return, or a Lamborghini, or a house, or $1 million. They're using you to try to either take part in their money laundering scheme or to straight up defraud you and take your money.
Jake, a little bit earlier this month, we had Allegan County Sheriff Frank Baker along with Prosecutor Myrene Cook join us, and they were talking about the case involving Dennis Lee Bowman, who was sentenced earlier this month in the death of a 14-year-old adopted daughter north of Allegan. This was a cold case situation stemming back from 1989. And the reason why I'm bringing this up with you, Jake, is the fact that we received a couple of comments on the story on our webpage, basically saying, well, what about a case in Kent County involving Deanie Peters, and another one that's the Deborah Polinsky case here in Ottawa County? It's almost as if you report on one cold case, there are people who are saying, what about our cold case? I hate to say you can't win, but you can't win in that regard.
Well, I can tell you, I'm very relieved that case has been resolved. I was not working when that case came in, or I don't recall it either. Maybe it was early in my career, but I was assigned to the cold case team myself as a detective back from 2015 to 2017. And we were certainly aware of the Bowman case. And I worked extensively on the Polinsky case as well. So in a perfect world, you'd clear one and you'd clear all of them. But it's not a perfect world, and we continue to work hard. We continue to work on the Polinsky case stays open. Our cold case team here is still staffed with 2 detectives and works every day on unsolved homicides, and we'd like to wrap them up. Unfortunately, they're not always all related, and each investigation has to stand on its own. You can't just lump them all together, as much as I wish that would happen.
Whenever I think about cold case in these parts, I know this story comes from before your time in terms of being on the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department, but I always think of the Janet Chandler case that the cold case team in Ottawa County certainly helped crack. Well, now 15 years ago, 16 years ago, it's been a while, but I still think about that case.
Right. Yeah, we worked with the Holland Department of Public Safety on that case. I was familiar with that case. That also overlapped a bit when I was assigned to the cold case team here. Tragic case. They're all tragedies, and it's great. The best thing for the cold case investigators and for me supervising the detectives, when you can provide that closure to the family, that's great. And if you can provide justice for the victim by getting a conviction, that's even better. So our cold case team now is currently still working on some things. They're mostly working on the 1994 homicide from the Coopersville area, Wright Township. I don't know if you followed that story, but we were recently able to identify that victim, a female victim from November of 1994, as Shelley Christian. She had been unidentified since 94 until just earlier this winter, when we finally, through DNA and genealogy, were able to identify her. So that was a huge win for us.
And one final thing, and I know this story will not be specifically for the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department because it was dealing with Holland City, the Holland Department of Public Safety, but the cooperation between jurisdictions certainly comes into play when, say, a suspect from one jurisdiction trying to flee the long arm of the law is run down to ground in our area. And I'm talking about the person from the Wisconsin area that was caught in Holland earlier this month, fled here after shooting outside a high school in Wisconsin. You have to coordinate with authorities in other jurisdictions, especially if the wanted persons are coming up in these parts. And so a lot of times they do want to come up to these parts there, Jake.
That's exactly right, Gary. And communication between law enforcement is so much better now. I'm frequently in communication with members from the Holland Department of Public Safety, the Kent County Sheriff's Office, Muskegon County Sheriff's Office, our other agencies, Grand Haven, Grand Valley PD, even in Ottawa County. So Zeeland PD, we have good relationships with all of them. Communication has come a long way. We were talking about cold case, and we're still investigating a 1967 unsolved homicide as well. And everything was done by mail. So they had to email out their communications, or I'm sorry, not email, US mail out their communications on different things, sending fingerprint cards, pictures, photos. Communication has come such a long way now with electronics. We can send lean messages through our law enforcement computers, or emails or photos by text message, by email, within seconds now, which used to take days or weeks to get through. So communications come a long way, and that has helped us apprehend some of these fugitives and solve some of these crimes.
He is Ottawa County Sheriff's Detective Captain it used to be Mark Bennett. It's now Jake Sparks, and has done a fine job since Mark's retirement. Jake, as always, thank you very much for your time. I know there's some other things I'd love to be able to chat with you about, but constraints do come. Wish you and everyone at the department well, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate you having me.